Welcome to episode 25 of The Creative Entrepreneur. This is Bob Baker, your host, and man, I am really excited about this week's interview. It's with Joe Vitale. You probably already know who Joe is. In case you don't, well, he's an author of like 50 some odd books, including like hypnotic writing and hypnotic marketing and the attractor factor. And there's tons of books on not only marketing, but sort of personal development and spirituality and all kinds of stuff. He played what I think is a prominent role in the movie and the book The Secret, which came out some years ago. He's been on, Larry King Live, and a very active guy. And as he reveals in this interview, he was once homeless for a short period of time and, obviously did not let that hold him back. And so this interview is filled with a lot of stuff about taking action, about the power of beliefs. And so I know you're really going to enjoy it. So yeah, this is episode 25, or, the 25th interview in this series. Many more coming. Have you seen them all? Do you know when all the interviews, the new ones, are posted? If not, there's a really easy way to find out. You can get on the Creative Entrepreneur VIP list. Just go to DIY Career Manifesto. That's DIY, the letters, Career Manifesto. And that is actually the name of a new book that I just put out on the Amazon Kindle store some months back. And when you get on the VIP list, which is free, I'll not only alert you when new episodes are posted, but I'm going to send you a big fat free sample of that book and just keep you posted on things that I'm up to and helping creative people, business-minded people improve their lives, and just trying to inspire you, to take action and take those gifts of yours and not hoard them to yourselves, but share them with the world and maybe even create a business out of it. So yeah, let's stay in touch, get on the list. And now that interview with Joe Vitale. Listen up, take notes. This is going to be a good one. Welcome to The Creative Entrepreneur. Bob Baker here. And man, I have a stellar guest with me today. Coming to me via Skype from his home in Texas is Joe Vitale. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great. I'm just admiring all those paintings behind you. Well, wow, I didn't know. You told me earlier you did those. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I am. I have many creative interests, which is actually why I started this Creative Entrepreneur series, because even though I'm kind of, and as you know, I'm probably best known for music marketing. That's my niche that I've been at for 20 years. But I also a lot of the advice that I have for musicians I could apply to creative fields of all kinds. And I've done painting, I've done theater, acting, done, I always say a writer, and
what a Renaissance guy.
Yeah. Man, and I think you are a bit of a Renaissance man yourself. Because, so I'll let folks know that this is not the first time we have communicated. Like, I think it was 3 years ago, I interviewed you for a membership club that I had with music marketing, and I think at that time you were on the verge of releasing your first music CD.
Yeah, I became a musician 3 years ago.
And even though you were a musician earlier before that, you just weren't like getting out there in the world.
I played campfire harmonica.
Was that it? You were going under the radar like I did for decades with my paintings. I decided to come out of the creative closet, as it were.
Yeah, me too.
And you did too. And how many music albums do you have out now?
Hey, my seventh one, seven is coming out this week.
7 albums in 3 years.
7 albums in 3 years. It's in production. It's not in production. It's at the Duplicators right now. And I'm working on album number 8.
That's amazing.
With Matthew Dixon, who's been my guitar instructor. I'm having a blast. This is something that was on my bucket list that I finally am getting to do it. So I have the singer-songwriter side, I have the more instrumental side, and I'm coming out with albums in both. But 7 this week, and 8 we're going into start making now.
That is amazing. So no one can accuse you of being a slacker, Joe.
I only sit down for interviews like this.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you need a rest. It's a great time. It's a great excuse.
This is my break.
But you and I go way back. I know in one of the earlier interviews that I did with you that we actually touched base initially like in the mid 90s or something, when you were just like still, I guess you had a book or two out back then, and you were like a copywriter or whatever.
Right,
and I know you had told me back then that you actually did mention your interest in music, and you were like a part-time player. I do recall that. So it's really cool to see you these years later, breathe some life into that. But a lot has happened to you, sir, over there were many years where we were kind of out out of touch. And so for folks who don't know, I mean, you're author of many, many books. Was it 50 or 60 now?
Well, I lost count, but it's certainly over 50 books at this point.
And then audio programs and all sorts.
I have all kind of audio programs with Nightingale Conant, and I don't know, a half a dozen sets with them, and some sets of my own, and DVDs, and I got a miracles coaching program, and I have courses and lots of ebooks. It just, I've been a force to reckon with here when it comes to productivity. I just follow my passion and keep producing.
Well, which makes you a perfect guest for this show, and why we've always kind of resonated with each other. And of course, I guess even though it's kind of becoming several years in the past now, but the big boost I guess came for you when the movie The Secret came out. You were, in my opinion, one of the more prominent people that stood out in that movie, and well,
it was certainly a turning point. Back in the 90s when the internet came along, I was one of the first to go on and do internet marketing. And I also wrote one of the first books on internet marketing with a book called Cyber Writing. And that was all in the 90s. So I became a copywriter, as you mentioned. Then I was on the internet and did internet marketing, became known for that because I was one of the first to do it. But when The Secret came out in 2006, that just blasted me into orbit in terms of recognition and success. And there's 24 teachers in that movie, but apparently, for whatever reason, I'm one of the 5 or 6 people seem to remember. But that led to me being on national television and in other movies and more book deals, and sent me around the world for speaking engagements. So it has been a wild ride. And then in the last 3 years, recreating myself as a musician while still writing more books and while still speaking and doing all the stuff that I've been known for.
Oh, cool.
So yeah.
So there was one. Well, you pretty much actually answered my next question was going to be. I was going to give you like a broad overview and then ask you to how do you describe when people say, Joe, what do you do? Who are you?
I tell them I do whatever the hell I want at this point. Whatever excites me, I just go and do it. But first and foremost, I still think of myself as an author. I am an author. I still write books. I have, 4 or 5 books coming out right now at the beginning of this year, 4 or 5 books with another one coming out in a month. So I am cranking out books because I think that's who I am. I am an author. I'm still a copywriter, and all the copywriting skills I ever learned, I've used to write my books. I've used in my speaking. I even use it in my music. So that's deeply influenced me. So I tell people if they need to know in one line, who am I? I'm an author. I write things that I hope make a difference and inspire people.
Right. I think that's what I took away when I first interviewed you 3 years ago. I think you guys maybe used the term writer instead of author. Pretty much they're interchangeable. I guess an author is just a writer who has who has published books.
It's been published.
Yeah,
right.
But you write on blogs and articles
yes.
and other things as well, but primarily books. And it sounds like you straddle both the traditional and the indie route in that you have a lot of books like on Otto Wiley, Nightingale Conant. Those are established publishing companies, but yet you also independently release other things or information products.
I have been published in every way, shape, and form you could mention. Right. Everything from self-publishing to vanity publishing to print-on-demand publishing to electronic publishing to audio publishing to the traditional publishing. The list goes on and on. Virtually, I can't even imagine that there's been a way to get published that I didn't do for something.
Right, at some point. And then, what was I going to say? That's right, I was going to ask you about collaboration. Like a lot of books you have written, you're the sole author of, but you do a lot of collaborating with other people and music.
I've done co-authored books. Meet and Grow Rich was a book on masterminds. Bill Hibbler and I wrote that one. A book that I have coming out in a couple weeks called The Remembering Process. That's co-authored with Daniel Barrett, who's my music producer, and he's a singer-songwriter in his own right and a lead singer for a band pretty popular in Texas called Porter Davis. And I've done books that were compilations of 30 or more people who all made contributions. Like I wrote the E Code, and I can't even say I wrote it because I compiled it. And all these other people made contributions, including me, and they all went into a book that ended up being called The E-Code and promoted. And there's probably all kind of other things that I've done as well, but I like being an author, but I also know I can get in print faster if I work with somebody else. And very often they want to work with me for the same reason, or at this point in time, they might want to hitch their wagon to somebody who's been recognized and already published. And so they might want to do it with me for that reason. But yeah, it's fun.
I actually have the the E code here.
Oh yeah,
and we, it's somewhere in my bookshelf in this very room. And then you're also known for, whether you mentioned the copywriting and the marketing, you're known for hypnotic marketing, which is, I think, was really cool of you to sort of attach a name and a phrase to your style. About mesmerizing, of pulling people in and engaging them, I guess, is really what that's all about. Not about.
Yeah, I coined the phrase hypnotic writing and later hypnotic marketing, and I wrote books on both of those. Hypnotic writing was my very first ebook, and that was one of the turning points in my life, because at that time I didn't think ebooks would sell. They were new. They weren't that popular. They were just textbooks at that point. They didn't have all the bells and whistles we have today. And I didn't think anybody would actually buy one. And boy, was I ever wrong, because this hypnotic writing is still a bestseller today. It still has been selling as an ebook. It was later picked up by a publisher. It is still in print with Wiley at this point. But I coined the phrase hypnotic writing to kind of separate myself as a copywriter and marketer from all the other copywriters and marketers that are out there. And hypnotic writing blended my interest in writing and in hypnosis. And I made the argument that with all of the competition going on and all of the things that are pulling at people's attention, you have to do something to really first grab their attention and then hold their attention. Otherwise, your message is never going to be heard. And so hypnotic writing is what I came up with to do just that.
Cool. Yeah. Luckily, I took an interest in the whole copywriting and started getting books, including yours, over the years. But it's amazing, people that are sort of new to marketing or promotion. Yeah, they're all talking about themselves and about things that aren't very engaging. Right. And so I'm glad that we're out there getting that message to people that need to hear it. There's one more thing I just want to ask you about, because I'm personally curious about it. And then before I get into my official list of questions, but I know in some of your audio, like, so you've mentioned that you are primarily a writer and an author, but you're also, because I listened to you interview other people, and including you actually had me as a guest once on one of your your interview things, and then I've heard you being interviewed in situations like this, and I'm always impressed at how good of an extemporaneous speaker that you are. And then I was even more impressed when on some of your audio programs at the beginning you say that you do them without notes, that you speak from the heart. And I think even on Nightingale, did you even do that with a Nightingale Conant program? So you literally go into a studio with no notes, not even an outline or anything?
No. The very first program I did with Nightingale Conant was called The Power of Outrageous Marketing. Every word was scripted. I read that entire thing, and it was my first program, so I didn't know any better, and they worked me until I dropped. They just kept me recording. I knew when I went back, I had learned a lot more about trusting myself. I knew what I had to talk about. I knew my subject matter. I knew the stories, and I had learned that I can be articulate. Just get out of my way and let me speak. And so all the other programs that I did with Nightingale Conant, I went into the studio with nothing more than an intent to create a program. But I didn't have a script. I didn't have the notes. I didn't have anything. I might pause now and then and kind of look off in space, waiting for the next inspired moment. But more often than not, I'm just speaking, much like I'm doing right now. And when I've gone into the studio for my own programs, I go into Austin and I go into the production block that Joel Block runs. And he's still in awe. And I don't mean this in bragging in any sense of the word, because I'm in awe that this even happens myself. I'll go into the studio, I'll get in front of the mic, he'll tell me he's recording, and I'll start talking. And I will keep talking for 45 minutes. There have been times when he left. He's supposed to be watching the engineering. He left. He went and got lunch. He comes back, and I'm still talking. And I'll look over because I'll glance out, and I can see through the window that he's back. And I'll go, oh, I guess lunch is here, and I'll stop. But it has been completely without notes, completely unscripted, entirely inspired, trusting myself, trusting the moment, and just doing it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think we all wish we had that. I guess you come almost like this that idea of becoming a vessel, or letting the inspiration move through you instead of having to force it to, letting it happen instead of making it happen.
Yeah, well, there's a difference too, though, because I tell people if I had to stand up and speak or be in front of a recording mic and talk about geometry or quantum physics, I couldn't speak more than a minute. I couldn't do it. It doesn't matter if I'm improvising or ad-libbing or trusting the process. I can't do it because I don't have it in me. But if I'm going to talk about music, I'm going to talk about copywriting, I'm going to talk about any of the books that I've written about, I'm going to talk about the law of attraction, I'm going to talk about The Secret. All of this is my life experience. So I can speak to it without having any sort of cue cards, if you will.
So even though you don't have like printed notes, there's still concepts in your head that are sort of up there that you know you're going to cover. It's just that the way you deliver it is totally in the moment. It sounds like
it is. And I've been heavily influenced by copywriting. I know pretty much how to speak as if I was writing, to grab attention, tell a story, involve the listener, and keep them engaged. This very same thing I do when I write a sales letter. Only I'm doing it when I'm speaking.
Right, and once if you've been at it for decades, like I know you have, then it becomes almost second nature.
Yes.
So that's awesome. I'm glad I had a chance to ask that question, Joe. All right, I'm going to go into my official list of questions, Joe, and find out what makes Joe Vitale tick here.
I'm curious, too.
So I'm interested in the spontaneous question or answers that come from you. So I always like to ask, if you were to look back over these recent decades and the factors that led to your success, if you had to identify like 3 key elements or factors, what would those be, Joe?
Okay, well, the very first one was I was laid off from an oil company that I was working for. This is back in the 1980s. I don't remember the exact year. I was writing. My first book was published in 1984, and I was speaking. I was doing adult education classes, and occasionally I would get some work from people who wanted some help with a book or a sales letter or ad copy, things like that. So I was working as a copywriter, but I didn't venture out on my own. I was working for an oil company that promised to always keep me in their family. That this oil company said that when you work for us, you're part of the family and we will always take care of you. Well, that was true until the recession hit and there was an oil crunch that was going on and all the oil companies were laying people off. They laid me off. And that was a turning point because I think I was too afraid to step out on my own. There was that promise of a weekly paycheck. As small as it was dependable, it was reliable, I could count on it, and I had my security. So being laid off was really a big stepping stone. I never went back and thanked the oil company because at the time it was I don't know if it was abusive, but it was certainly a surprise and a disappointment, and it threw me out into the world in the deep end. But it forced me to become a full-time self-employed author, speaker, copywriter, consultant. So that's the first thing that happened. And the second thing is, thank God for the public library because I've always gone there to learn. I've always gone there to read, to develop myself, to learn new skills. And I didn't even know what the word copywriting meant when I was growing up. I knew books and I knew writing, and I thought that I'd be a playwright or a fiction writer or a comedy writer. I never knew what a copywriter was. But as I kept reading all these different books about writing, along the way I come across the book that's talking about copywriting. And I thought, what is that? It sounds like you're copying somebody else's writing. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Or people think of the Library of Congress, that type of copy.
Yes, you get a copyright.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's not the case at all. Yeah.
No, it's writing sales materials, as you know, and it's learning how to write sales letters and publicity pieces and advertisements and all of that. Well, I became real excited because I could use the skills as a writer I was already developing, the fiction writing techniques, dialogue writing techniques, all of that, and apply them to the world of sales copy. And so that was a turning point. When I started to write sales copy, that's when I started to make money from my writing. When I'm trying to send out plays or fiction stories or poetry, occasionally I got published, but I didn't make any money. With copywriting, started to make some money. And then the third thing that I would look at is belief. I was homeless for a while. You may or may not know that. And I was in poverty for a very long time. And those experiences pretty much devastate your self-esteem. And so I went through a period of thinking that I'm worthless, I'm not going to be a success, there is no hope for me, a very dark night of the soul kind of an experience. But again, reading books like The Magic of Believing and Napoleon Hill's books, some of the classic success literature, all of that gave me new hope and new belief in myself. And that's the third leg of all of this, because having belief that there was hope for me, having the optimism that this could work out, having the belief in myself and in the possibility of freelance success as at least a copywriter, that's what kept me going. So those are the three things that come to mind.
Yeah, and so that job that you got laid off from back in the 80s, is that the last day job or time you worked for someone else for the most part?
Oh, that would have been the last one, yeah. I've never gone back, never wanted to go back, never needed to go back.
So you've been self-employed for nearly 30? Is that 30 years or close to it or something?
I'm not good at math, but it'd be along those lines. Yeah, we're in a new century.
Yeah, but that's awesome. And the public library, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people, throughout this interview series, people have talked about the importance of education, and quite often they talk about making an investment in your education, which is good, books and workshops and consulting sessions and all that. But there are free options too if you're short on money in the library and the internet now, or for the last 15 years. There's no excuse for not educating yourself on whatever topic it is.
I absolutely agree. For me, I lived in the public library during the homeless time. That's how I got out of the elements. But I've always been a bookaholic. I'm in a library now with thousands of books around me, plus there's another building with books. And of course, I'm an Amazon shopper, so every day I'm on Amazon, and I'm a one-click addict here. I click on a book, and it's got to be here in a minute if I want it for my Kindle, or tomorrow or the next day if I want it to have it in my hands. The point being that I'm still growing. I'm still learning. Even becoming a musician, I devoured all the books on music marketing, your books in particular, books on singing, books on songwriting. I'm getting the audio programs. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And I do that in the spiritual world as well, still reading other people's material. I'm writing, of course, but I'm also reading. And I think that's one of the important keys to success, is that investment in yourself.
Yeah. And another thing that occurs to me that's worth mentioning is that we talked about all the books and all the information products, but you cover such a wide variety of topics, and it's been sort of an evolution where early on it was more about the marketing and the internet marketing and the hypnotic writing, but then then I guess actually just the reason you were in The Secret is because you had started delving into spiritual matters, and so you do everything from telling personal development stuff to even sort of, I don't know, meditation CDs, but I know you have these CDs where you speak over music to kind of ingrain positive thoughts into people.
Yeah, I have subliminal CDs. I have affirmation CDs. I have meditation, hypnosis, all of those things. But what I'm really doing is I'm following what excites me. Mm-hmm. And I think this is one of the secrets to success, is finding out what your particular passion is. I think it's unique to each person, and then following that passion. Mm-hmm. As I learned to do that early on, even when it took me in all kind of bizarre directions, because people would look at me and go, well, you're studying marketing, but now you're studying metaphysics. How do they go together? Well, one of the first books I wrote that was a big success was a book called Spiritual Marketing. Mm-hmm. I combined both of those interests into one book. Well, that book, which is still free online today, it's been downloaded millions of times. That book led to being published by a big publisher who retitled it as The Attractor Factor. The Attractor Factor is the book that this movie producer in Australia read, hunted me down, called me up, and said she was going to make a movie about the law of attraction, and she wanted me in it. That movie became The Secret. But I didn't know that this domino effect would happen when I had gone all the way back and I'm simply following my passion. And my passion said, study metaphysics, study marketing. And then at one point, put them both together and write something called spiritual marketing. Logically, it doesn't make any sense. But from my heart, from following my passion, it was exactly the right thing to do. And I'm at a level of success today that I couldn't even imagine when I was successful being one of the first on the internet. So following your passion, that's all I've ever done, and that's what I encourage others to do.
Yeah, and the real cool thing about that spiritual marketing book was, instead of delving off into a completely new unrelated field, you sort of attached it to what you were already known for, the marketing, but added the spiritual aspect. So it was kind of almost like a segue, an easy transition into that new area.
Yeah, and people went with me. In other words, they were reading it. I was actually, this is probably worth mentioning, I was afraid to release the book Spiritual Marketing in a big public way. I didn't want to put my ammo behind it and make a big promotion for it, because I thought people were really going to judge me as being almost insane because I've gone on to this woo-woo world. And yet, that book is become the Attractor Factor is the most popular book out of everything I've ever written. And I've written the marketing books, the publicity books, other self-improvement books and woo-woo books and all this other stuff. Spiritual marketing, which became the Attractor Factor, is hands down the one the world loves. And I almost didn't release it because of fear.
That's amazing. Yeah, I actually have a similar. Actually, this week I think I'm gonna come out of the closet in another way. Instead of with art, I have actually a book that I've been working on for years called "Personal and Spiritual Growth for Fun People," where
I like
the secret guide to joy and prosperity, where it's as if the Supreme Being is writing it himself, but he has like a sense of humor. It's like if The Secret and Conversations with God met Dave Barry at a Jerry Seinfeld concert.
I like this.
You like this?
I like this.
So,
I want to read this one.
So this is actually my first time publicly, saying this.
We have an exclusive. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm about. But I too had the same kind of. Oh God, what are people going to think? There's bound to be some people that it's going to rub the wrong way. But you just kind of break through that fear and get it out there, right?
I have found out that our wealth is hiding behind the very thing we're afraid to do. This is an insight that I had to get through my own experience because I was afraid of coming out with different products like spiritual marketing. And what it turns out is if you're following your passion and you really know this is what you love and this is the direction to go, even when there's fear there, you have to face the fear because under that rock of fear is a pot of gold. So I encourage you to come out with a book. It sounds great, and I want to read it.
Well, cool. I will send you a copy, Joe. So thanks.
Please.
All right. I'm getting some personal coaching here. All right, this has been amazing. I got to keep an eye on the time because you and we could easily talk for 2 or 3 hours, but I'm going to respect your time and our listeners and viewers' time.
Okay.
And get on to the next question, which is, challenges. I'm sure you have faced, and you've already touched on some of them, some business or creative or personal challenges. So if you could just pick out one, that would be a great lesson on, how you overcame it, what you learned from it. From your own life, what would that be?
Yeah, well, it's a great question because after doing this for 3 decades, there's been all kind of challenges. But what occurs to me is the idea that whenever I take on a big project, and I'm going to use the example of a book. I wrote a book on P.T. Barnum back in the 90s. It's called There's a Customer Born Every Minute. And I'm really proud of the book. I was fascinated by P.T. Barnum. I was passionate about learning all about his business principles because he was an entrepreneur, a politician, a best-selling author, marketing genius, publicity genius, and I wanted to tell the story. So I ended up getting a contract from the publisher to do this. And the first thing that happened was panic because I realized Barnum was overwhelming as a character. He lived 80-some years, and he had so many adventures and so many projects, and I wanted to understand his business and his principles, and I wanted to also learn them so I can apply them today and write a book that wasn't just a biography, but was a success manual. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that happened was overwhelm. And I've noticed that this happens every time I take on a project, that as soon as I start thinking about, okay, I have to write this book, or now I'm going to create this new music CD, and I've got to write 10 songs, the first thing that happens is panic. And so the thing that I've learned from that challenge is that when I break everything down into manageable, bite-sized chunks, I can do it. I remember when the Barnum book deal was there, and at first I'm elated because I got the deal, and then I'm panicking because now I have to write a huge book. One of the things I did was get 15 manila folders, and I labeled each one of them Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, Chapter 4. I just broke it all down, and then I started asking myself, what would be in Chapter 1? Well, there's an introduction of some sort, so I wrote introduction there. And then I started just making it up. What's going to be in Chapter 2? Well, I wasn't really sure, but I knew P.T. Barnum had been a speaker at one point. It was one of the ways he raised money when he had gone bankrupt. So I wrote speaker on that folder. And then as I was doing all my research, whenever I came across an anecdote about speaking, it went in the speaking folder. And I did the same thing with all of those folders. And so the punchline here is by breaking down the overwhelming challenge, whatever it had to be in my life, into pieces that I can manage and either do in an hour or do in a day or do by the week, I knew that I can get the project done. And obviously, I got the book done. The book went into print. It became a bestseller. It was one of the first things I was on television for, was that book. It was later picked up by another publisher, and it's still in print today, and I'm still very proud of that book. But it started with the feeling of, oh, my God,
So
how am I going to do it?
And that overwhelm is something everyone feels. And so basically it's like the chunk it down theory there. And and David Allen, he wrote that book, Getting Things Done. And one of the big takeaways for me from that was how important it was to separate projects from next action steps. And so like writing a book is a project which consists of many, many steps.
Beautiful.
But all you need to do is focus on what's the very next thing I need to do. So focus on the next sentence, the next paragraph. The current chapter that you're working on, and don't worry.
And it works for everything. That's why I was bringing it up. No matter what's going on, it's a new business deal, it's a new project, it's somebody's an architect and has to create the master plan. You do it one step at a time. Break it down into manageable steps. You can get it done.
Great advice. So let's go on to the next question, where this is a hypothetical. If you could go back in time, Joe, and have a conversation with young Joe Vitale, and you could pick whatever a year that happens, and you could give yourself, young Joe, 3 pieces of advice, and here they are. Then we'll tackle them one at a time. One is, what would you recommend that you do exactly the same, because it served you well? What would you avoid, like some of the time wasters that you just weren't wise enough to know? And then what are some of the good things that if you had known better, you would have added them into the mix earlier? So we'll start with, what did you do right? What would you do exactly the same?
These are great questions. I would continue to write articles. Way back, and this is before the internet, I was writing articles for DBA magazine in Houston. And I wasn't getting paid anything for those articles, but it was a guest column, and so I would write something about marketing or publicity, and it would be published there, and there'd be a little resource box that had, here's Joe Vitale, and here's how to reach him. I never knew the credibility building impact that kind of free service would do for me. I did it first because it was a chance to be published. But as I started to get clients and so forth from that, I realized the power of writing articles. When the internet came along, I was very skeptical about making money on the internet. I was one of the first to write an article to say that it was a big scam and that you couldn't make any money in cyberspace, which shows you how smart I actually am. And I would take articles that I was writing and reluctantly put them in places like AOL, and CompuServe was around at the time, and they had public libraries, and I would put my articles there. And lo and behold, I don't know, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people all over the planet were now reading those articles and then contacting me to say, hey, I liked what you said. I want to hire you to write a sales letter or something else. I still write articles today because this still works. And most of my articles end up on my blog, but even the ones on my blog, I might distribute through some sort of article distribution service online. So writing articles worked then, works now, and will probably always work. Content is what people want. And I learned a long time ago that I could write content, and I could probably write it on a daily basis, and people loved it.
It's cool.
So it was good for me and good for them.
I mentioned when we first connected back in the 90s, and I remember one of the things you did is you actually, this is before, I might have had email, but I think you actually sent me a package of some photocopies of some of those articles from that DBA Houston thing, and I think you had a little book about how to write fast or something like that.
Yeah, Turbocharge Your Writing was a little booklet I wrote. Yeah, 16 pages long, but boy, people ate that thing up.
Yeah, and you sent that to me, and I think I sent you some of my like a cassette or something of one of my early audio programs.
Wow, we go way back. We're a couple
crazy.
Dinosaurs.
And, so, and the same thing for me, the early early on in the internet in the 90s when video wasn't available, audio was still like they were still trying to figure out MP3s and all that. Text was the way to get your message, and I did the same thing. By email, I would offer my articles to any music website that wanted to run them, and that's how I did the exact same thing. So I know firsthand the power.
And I'm still doing it today.
Yes, indeed. And so your advice to young Joe, what would you avoid, or what were some of the things, the time wasters?
Well, we're talking about business here, and so one of the big things I would avoid is paid advertising, especially for a self-employed creative person. If I was talking to a big corporation, I might say something differently. But for me in particular, I found that even though I knew how to write a great ad, because I studied the great copywriters, I knew about hypnotic writing, I knew how to create headlines, I can write a great ad, I found that advertising in and of itself was pretty suspect, that it didn't get the results that everybody bragged about, and it was very, very expensive, that even the small ads always cost something. So all those ads that I experimented with, I'm glad I did it so I can sit here today and say I learned from it. But if I had to do it over again, I would have put that money in my pocket, or I would have used it to send out news releases and paid for a service to send those out or distribute them in some way. But advertising does work, but because it's so expensive, I wouldn't recommend doing it. I wouldn't tell the young Joe who is already struggling to go and spend money on advertising. I'd say, no, let's redirect that.
Right. It's another thing that I can relate to. I spent very little on advertising, and I think a lot of people think they can. Their problem is a lack of money. And if they just throw money at something, they'll get the notoriety, but really that's rarely the case.
Right. It's more a lack of creativity and a lack of risk taking and doing some of the other things. More like guerrilla marketing.
Exactly, which is a topic that's close to my heart.
Yes.
And so what would you then advise to young Joe add into the mix earlier that you didn't know at the time that it would serve you well?
Well, one of the things I learned from P.T. Barnum was the value of publicity. And I've had great home run success sending out news releases and watching the media actually promote me. And so I would have done that a lot sooner. I would have learned about the power of writing a news release, sending it out there to promote me, my product or service. Of course, there's an art to writing news releases. I didn't want to send them out and have them be ego trips. Hey, Joe Vitale did this. They don't care. But if I have the story behind it, for example, when The Attractor Factor was published by a bigger publisher, the latest Harry Potter book was coming out at the time. And so my book was climbing up the bestseller list, but the Harry Potter book was #1 and nobody was shaking it. I started sending out news releases that was talking about this poor individual author in Texas who was going up against a media empire. So it was the underdog story. And I sent that out, and the press started sending it out. They started putting it out there to the audience that I wasn't reaching on my own. And my book unseated the latest Harry Potter book and became a #1 bestseller. So I learned the power of these publicity, of guerrilla marketing through publicity and news releases. And what I would have done is started that sooner and used it for everything that I was doing, whether it was my speaking engagements, my classes, new products, all of that. I would have started it way earlier.
That's awesome. So yeah, the power of writing. Writing is the I think Jeffrey Gitomer or something says writing is the basis of all wealth, something like that. Be leery of paid ads, or know that's not the miracle cure, and then do publicity earlier. I think that's great advice for everyone.
Yes.
All right, here's a question I always like to ask authors in particular, because as you mentioned earlier, Joe, you're not only an author, but you're a voracious reader, as am I. And so if I had to nail you down and have you pick like a book in particular that changed your life and why, there's probably many of them, but how would you answer that question?
That's actually opening a can of worms, because I don't want to just say one book. Come on, I want to grab the moment.
Go ahead. If you want to name 2 or 3, that's fine, but I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to go then, because the very first book that deeply influenced me did it when I was a teenager. It's called The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. And The Magic of Believing is still in print today. It came out in the 50s. I read it in the 60s. I've read it 7 or 8 times, at first from the library. Now today I have autographed copies of it because I collect the book. But it was all about the power of the mind, when you can actually believe something and you can visualize that it was going to tend to happen in your reality. And that was a turning point for me, because it just woke me up to the power that was in me that was untapped. So that's The Magic of Believing. Another book that most people don't know about is called The Book of Est by Luke Reinhardt. The Book of Est, E-S-T. That book shook me awake, because that book is a fictionalized description of an actual EST seminar. EST was big in the 70s. It was the very confrontational seminar with Werner Erhard. It was called EST is Erhard Seminar Training, I believe is what EST stands for. But the book put you there without actually being in the room. The book put you in it because it was so well written. It was hypnotic writing at its best. But it also shook me because it was talking about personal responsibility at a level I had never comprehended before. And it was important for me to realize that everything that was going on in my life, I was directly involved in the creation of it, or the attraction of it, if you will. So that book was a wake-up call. I'm glad to be able to say that decades after reading it, I met the author, befriended him, and now I'm the publisher of his book. We brought that book back in print. So the Book of S by Luke Reinhardt is now back in print because of me and a friend. And then the third book that I want to give credit to is called the Robert Collier Letter Book. The Robert Collier Letter Book. Robert Collier is mostly known as a metaphysical writer, and I read him when I was in my teenage years. He wrote The Secret of the Ages and Riches Within Your Reach. But I didn't know until 20-some years after first reading him that he was actually a copywriter. And he wrote this book that came out in the 50s. It was published a few days before he died, called the Robert Collier Letter Book, which was this giant manual of how to write persuasive copy. That book changed my life as a writer. I was a pretty good writer before it. I was a hypnotic writer after it. You can still find copies of that book on eBay. Their family has printed a early version of it. He had rewrote it a little bit, and that version you have to find on eBay. But the Robert Collier Letter Book by Robert Collier was the third book that really deeply redirected my life.
Magic of Believing, Book of Est, and the Robert Collier Letter Book. And I will have links to these in the show notes at DIY Career Manifesto, as well as links to your stuff, Joe.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Wow. Well, 3 power-packed books there. So here's kind of a deep philosophical question. You know, we've already established you do a wide variety of things, all related to writing and teaching and speaking, and on a variety of topics, although they are related. And I come to realize, too, that your evolution as your topic into spirituality and personal growth is an extension of who you are, because you've obviously been interested in those topics for decades. Exactly. That's the ideal way to make a living, is to fully express who you are.
That's it right there.
But what truly motivates you? What's the underlying reason, your big why? Why do you do all of this stuff, if I had to ask that question, bottom line?
That's a great question. Well, I believe my life calling is to inspire people to go for and achieve their dreams. So that everything I'm writing, and even my music, I call myself the world's first self-help singer-songwriter. And that's a way for me to separate myself from the 3,000 new albums that come out every week and the masses of musicians that are out there that are far better than me. I needed to separate myself from the crowd. But when I say I'm the world's first self-help singer-songwriter, what's driven behind it, what's motivating me, is the idea that I want to inspire people. If I inspire people to change their lives, transform their lives, enrich their lives, to be happier or healthier, I feel I've accomplished my mission on earth. So everything that I write, my books, my audios, the music, even events like this that I'm doing, behind it all is the idea that I want to inspire people. I want them to have hope and optimism and belief in themselves, and as well as getting the tools to make the change. So inspiring people, that's what's doing it.
That's awesome. I find that's the root of most successful people is the touching others and making an impact in other people's lives. So awesome. I'm glad that you said that, but I'm not surprised. What's on the horizon, Joe? I know you always got a lot of projects. You mentioned you got like an 8th album you're going to be working on. But anything else we can look for in the coming months? Or
well, sure. One of the big things that's on my list is I want to end homelessness. Now this is a big goal, and I saw your eyes just
whoa, that is a biggie.
open. But and part of it is, I still have the sting of being homeless at one point, and I see people that are actually homeless. And the truth is, some people want to be homeless. That's their lifestyle, and for various reasons, they're comfortable with that. But there are good people who are ending up losing their homes or lost their jobs, or they were disabled, or they didn't have health insurance, whatever it happens to be, and they end up without a home. And I believe homelessness can be stopped. I believe it in the same way Abe Lincoln wanted to end slavery, so that we can look back at it today and go, well, that was something that was actually real, but now it's in the history books. I want homelessness to be like that. So in the future, we read back about it and go, wow, people were really homeless. So it's in the past tense. I put up a website at Operation Yes, Y-E-S. I have a book coming out in the next couple of weeks that's interviews with a whole bunch of people that were at one point homeless, including myself. And it's all about inspiring people to make differences, and in some cases, giving them the concrete information. That's at OperationYes.com. And I have a book that I give away called Attract Money Now. That's at AttractMoneyNow.com. And all of this is in the direction of doing my best to give people the inspiration and the information that can either stop them from losing their home, or actually, if they've lost it, give them the strength to get back on their feet and move forward. So yeah, I got new books coming out. I have new music coming out. I'm excited about all kinds of things that I'm personally doing, but in a global, big, audacious kind of a way. Yeah. The idea of ending homelessness. I think even the idea, just stating the idea, wedges something in consciousness in the public, and they go, wow, I never even thought that could be a possibility. Now that we have it as a possibility, let's see what we can do to make it a reality.
You got to hold the vision to make it happen.
Yes,
that's fantastic. Now, I was jotting down a lot of the websites that you were mentioning. Again, I'll include as many of these as I can in the show notes. But where would you like people to find you online?
Oh, thank you. Well, my main website, which has been up since you and I first met back in the 90s, is at MrFire.com, www.mrfire.com. MrFire.com. That was a nickname that was given to me a long time ago when we were all putting up websites and we didn't know any better, and I thought, what do I call mine? Well, I should have called it Joe Vitale, and JoeVitale.com will get you there now. But back then, it's like, well, that nickname seemed to work. I'll put up a website and call it MrFire.com. Yeah. Still there.
That may have been what influenced me to a lot of my social media things. I use Mr. Buzz Factor because that's my music
that's
website.
Right,
is the Buzz Factor. It never occurred to me until I was interviewing you or something you were interviewing me and asking where people can find me online, and I said it and I went, wait a second, Mr.
Yes,
I wonder if I was inadvertently influenced by that, but that's cool. It was MrFire.com. Does that link to all of your other would they find your music and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a portal to everything. Pack a lunch when you go to MrFire.com because you'll be there a while. It's links to the blog, videos, articles, catalogs. It goes on and on.
Awesome. Well, it's always great to talk to you, Joe. And you never know what's going to come up.
This is a riot. I love it.
Yes. Well, I
love talking to you.
Thank you for all that you do, for making yourself available, but for all that you do in the world to inspire and empower people.
Thank you.
And it's got to feel good to know that you've touched so many people over the years.
Well, the same with you. So thank you very much, but also I applaud you for what you're doing. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe, and thank you for watching. And also, if you want to leave a comment, you can do it either on YouTube if you're watching the video version of this. If you're watching or listening to the audio podcast, you can go to DIY Career Manifesto and look for Joe's interview on that site and leave a comment there. Let us know what you think. And so thanks for watching. I'll be back again soon with another interview with another amazing person. So long for now.